Hello, hi, my name is Jennifer TOSH, and I am the founder of Black Heritage Tours in Amsterdam and in New York, and I'm thrilled to be here with you guys. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but thanks for making this happen. A little bit about myself. I was born in New York in 1960, so right in the middle of the Civil Rights Movement. My parents and my ancestors all come from Suriname, South America, so that's my connection to the Netherlands. My parents actually left Aruba, which is where they actually met and lived for several years before going to the U.S., where I was born. So I'm literally the first generation of my family born in the U.S. I came to the Netherlands over 6 years ago as a student, as an exchange student. We called ourselves OWLs, Older, Wiser Learners. I really wanted to immerse myself in Dutch history and culture and to experience Dutch culture. My mother grew up in Amsterdam after World War II. She was a student teacher. At that time, the educational system in Suriname was very bad, and so she was here to get a Western education, to expand her knowledge. And so I wanted to really follow in her footsteps to explore this history. I had this great opportunity to study abroad, and I took full advantage of coming here because a lot of my family are here. I was really surprised when I went to a Dutch university that I was experiencing colonial history, but they were so focused on just one aspect of that history. They were talking mostly about the glory of the Dutch Golden Age. That's usually the period of the 17th century. And we're leaving a lot of the narrative out about Suriname, of course, which is very connected to my heritage, and talking very little about colonialism or slavery, and even less about the black presence or black history in the Netherlands, and saying mostly that it didn't exist, that there was no black presence here until much later when Suriname became independent. So of course, I'm like, wait a minute, you're leaving out half of my heritage and family story, and I wanted to prove that there was not only a black history, but it was before slavery started, and also to show that it's still visible in the architecture and the landscape. And that's what my research really took me on this journey that I had no idea was going to lead me to where I am today. And I really connected with some incredible people, including this organization that at that time was a research institute called NINSE, which is the National Institute for the Study of Slavery and its Legacies. What you might kind of think of as the NAACP version of that. But it was so important because I met some incredible scholars there who were already working on this narrative and this deeper research on this history. So together with what I had already learned, I also attended a summer school called Black Europe Summer School, which was an amazing, very intensive 2-week course on the African diaspora and social movements like, of course, slavery or just migration. And I think that the two experiences that I had at a Dutch university and that summer school, which by the way is still going on and I really can't say enough about, really helped me to understand what the gaps were, what the disconnect was. And I thought, well, I found so much of the traces of the colonial past still visible that I had to take some friends on a boat tour. Of course, you're in Amsterdam, you got to do a boat tour, right? So that's where it started, and people were so surprised that you could see so much of the colonial past, the legacy of that still visible on monuments and canal houses and in the museum. And I kept getting asked to do it again and again, and finally in 2013 is when I started the tour. So the question that gets asked of me a lot is, what is it to be an African American living in Europe, or in this case in the Netherlands? And I had to really pause because one of the things I really try to demystify is the idea that I'm having an African American experience in the Netherlands or in Europe. Because we have such a strong identity of what Black American culture is, that we tend to think that that experience is replicated no matter where we live. And I really, really reject that idea. Because what I'm having is a Black experience as a Black woman, as someone who has these very deep Suriname roots and Dutch roots, and I'm having that experience living here. So I'm fully immersed, I'm fully submerged in Black Dutch culture and life. And I really think that if my friends who are from the US living in the Netherlands or in Europe, a lot of us tend to just take our American experience and then we're having it no matter where we are. So that means we're not really integrated into society. We don't feel connected to it. We're not involved in any of the activism or the social movements that are a part of it. And that's very different than what I'm having, the experience I'm having. I feel very much like, and I also have dual nationality because of my heritage, and I am very much involved in Black Dutch culture, life, activism. What happens to my brothers and sisters of the diaspora here affects me just as much. So it's a different kind of narrative than saying I'm having an African-American experience living in another country. I really am not. It's very, very different than that. And I'm very proud of that because there are so many beautiful layers of what it is to be a part of this diaspora around the world. And I've traveled so much to Egypt, to the East Indies, to all these different places, the Caribbean, where I see how we as a people throughout the world, which what diaspora really means, the disbursement of the African heritage and culture, and it's different. It's not monolithic. It's not the same no matter where you go. And I really encourage us as people, Black Americans, when we leave the U.S. to try and step outside of that context so you can truly embrace other cultures as it relates to us. So one of the questions that really gets also asked of me a lot is about this idea of blackness in Europe. What does it mean to be black? And that's, today I just had this experience on a tour where I talk a lot about the history of the Moors, and I'm very conscious of how I refer to the Moors, because depending on who you're talking to, the term Moors, the etymology, the origin of the word Moors means something very different to different people. So when I'm talking to people from this context in the Netherlands, most people know that I'm talking about Africans, North Africans. I've had groups of people who come from places like Morocco or other places, the Arab world, and when you talk about Africans, they refer to them as Arabs. So you have to be conscious of the context in which you're referring to. And really the history of the Moors that I'm very focused on in this particular frame is the migration of the Moors that left North Africa, that had ruled the Iberian Peninsula, which is now we call Portugal and Spain, and parts of the Mediterranean and Italy, portions of Italy for 7 centuries. And those Moors, those North Africans, were also part of the sub-Saharan Africans who migrated northward and really dominated that region for a very long time. And not until 1492, when Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand conquered the final reign of the Moors after 7 centuries. And many of them were expelled for not converting to Christianity. And where did they go? A lot of them went to what places that we call Western Europe, including the Netherlands. So the earliest documented history that we have of this migration are people that came from literally all over the continent of Africa. There were also people that had migrated with the Portuguese Jews that is now present in our early history. One of my colleagues, Mark Ponta, has been doing such phenomenal research on this early black presence in Amsterdam, for example. And so we know places like Madagascar, Sao Tome, Cape Verde, Puerto Rico, Angola, of course, what we know is Ghana. And so this early migration of what I consider the Moors that traveled throughout Europe, that settled here, is very, very present in the architecture, in the museums, artwork, in the monuments. That's part of what the tour experience is exploring how the presence of African people are represented in these different contexts. And they mean very different things depending on what we're looking at or where we are in the city. So Moorish history is very, very strong legacy in this region, and yet we're still contesting of what is the meaning of the Moors. What does it mean? But in Europe, we know that there was definitely a strong presence of the Moors long before slavery was ever institutionalized, and that legacy is now, I think, coming full circle. So it's really exciting to see how it's continuing to evolve, and the more we learn about them through this tour experience or through the research that's being done, I think the more that we can broaden our minds around this Black presence or African presence in Europe today. So I know your theme this year is diversity in Black, and I really like the theme, and I want us to just broaden our minds a little bit about thinking about diversity, because when we talk about diversity, certainly in today's climate and culture, everybody wants to have diversity in their workplace and in terms of how they are represented. But they usually want to think of it only as having different people, groups, right? You have an Asian person, you have a Black person, you have someone from a different continent. So that usually represents the diversity. But I want us to go deeper, to valuing the differences. Diversity is about valuing our differences. And when we do that, then we're really looking at what is that person's culture. What makes their culture different than ours, and we'll find also that there's a lot of things that bring us together because we have a lot of similarities. And then we are not as concerned about having someone representing each different race, but we're also more interested in who they are as a people. And when you go to travel to different countries, then you're more interested in immersing yourself in that culture, as opposed to trying to fit our idea of one group on every single place that we visit. So really love the idea of diversity, but really let's think about the valuing of our differences. And then I think it makes the experience much richer and a lot deeper. Shameless plug, when you come to Amsterdam, and I hope you all do, you get a chance to experience also history and the diversity of our history through the tour lens. I've co-written now 3 books, the 2 of them one is about Amsterdam, the other is about New York, but I also want us to think about other publications. This one is about decolonizing the mind. A lot of people don't know about Dutch colonial history or Black history in the Netherlands, and there's a lot of new research that is now being a part of that narrative. So I really am excited about sharing that with all of you. Sorry I couldn't be there, but I'm glad I'm there in spirit and certainly hope that my message is heard. Thank you and have a great day.